I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked. On today's show, we'll be talking with Dr. Karla Phlypo and Ellie Campisano on being caught in the onslaught of information and what it means to our lives and the lives of young people just starting out. After our conversation, I'll explore one of the strategic approaches for making sure that you always have knowledge that's fresh. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about activating the resilient leader in you. The world produces an estimated 403 million terabytes of data every day. Now that's 403 with 18 zeros behind it. All of us struggle with deciding how to capture what we need from this onslaught without being carried away by the current. Does this impact teenagers more easily than adults? Not really. While the technology may be easier, the task is even harder when you consider they're dealing with challenges that will impact their entire careers. My guests, Dr. Karla Phlypo and Ellie Campisano, will explore this growing concern with understanding, strategies, and a lot of compassion. My first guest is Dr. Karla Phlypo, co-partner at the Recharge Institute, LLC, brings over 20 years of expertise in automotive product and manufacturing development expertise and knowledge management. I love that combination. She led global knowledge creation teams and conducted over 3,500 coaching sessions to enhance innovation. With a PhD in applied management and decision sciences, her current work focuses on knowledge management, organizational learning, and the integration of AI in education. Karla, welcome to Unlocked.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Oh, it's likewise to have you here. Well, let me bring on Ellie, but first, growing up, Ellie, that's Ellie Campisano, flourished when educators and coaches nurtured her learning style and intellectual needs. Oh, I just love that. But she also saw many friends struggle without that support and guidance. Hoping for everyone to experience an empowering education, Ellie began tutoring in high school and then went on to do tutoring and counseling with teens and college students during her time at Harvard. And she hasn't stopped since. Ellie holds a master's in childhood education. She is passionate about meeting students at their level, creating strategic learning programs for their unique needs, supporting them in reaching their academic goals and developing their confidence as lifelong learners. Ellie, welcome to Unlocked.
Thank you so much, Madelyn. It's great to be here. And thanks, Carla, for being here as well.
Likewise.
All right. I am so excited to have the two of you on because I know that you have similarities and you have differences. And I want to hear that combination because this is a big, big area that even I have written on. So we all have our opinions. But what I'm really interested in to begin with is each of you have a clear passion around learning. I think our audience would like to know what brought you to this place. So Ellie, why don't we begin with you?
Absolutely. So, you heard a bit about this in my bio, but basically I've always found that many peers initially, and now, many people who are my students or mentees have often struggled to find their place and find a place of belonging in their world, in their community. And even people who seem kind of successful and doing great, they might still feel that way. And especially those who don't feel like they're externally successful or doing that great. And, a lot of kids' community is at school, just sort of by default. That's a big part of it. And I had a lot of trouble early in school with feeling really ostracized. And that had a big impact on my learning and a big impact on how I felt about being at school and how I felt about being able to be taken seriously as a learner. And as I really found educators who saw my potential, but also just saw me as somebody who just needed, to be kind of drawn out of my shell or nurtured in a slightly different way, I was really able to thrive and, find ways to be part of the community that I so wanted to be a part of and wasn't sure where I fit. And that's something that I really want for everybody. I want that for adults. I want that for kids. But, one of the ways that I can do that in the world right now is to support teen and young adult learners in finding their place academically and in their school community more broadly or in their community more broadly so that they feel empowered to, take on a great role in the world that is really right for who they are and what they bring to society.
Well, if anybody doubted it, they don't doubt now that you are passionate about this. So, Carla, how about you?
Well, learning was always difficult for me because I never fit into the mold that was portrayed by education in general. And it wasn't until I went and decided for a crazy moment to get a PhD that I fell in love. I was always a good learner, meaning that I abided by the rules, but it didn't have any meaning for me until I got to the level of a PhD, and then I realized that all of the mentoring that I had been doing in the automotive world was really well utilized as part of the learning process in getting the PhD. And the program that I was in actually had you write these like 300 300 page or 200 page um, like I would say like test run at your lit review, and then you had a project that you had to finish as a result of it. And that really resonated with me. And so, learning to me has to be experiential. We're in a 3D world, and you can go ahead and test all you want, but you know what? At the end of the day, if you don't experience it, you don't know it. That's really the truth of it. So I found that that program really changed things for me dramatically as far as really blossoming my love of learning.
Well, I have to tell you guys, it's in the midst of my PhD, I wrote my PhD was on one topic, it was actually on research. I wrote one sentence: create a learning environment. And I went back and I reread my dissertation. And I said, oh my goodness, what did I mean by that? And so I spent the next 20 years delving into what it means.
Yeah.
So we're all passionate. All right, let's get to what we're really talking about, that onslaught of information. The amount of information that is available to us is mind boggling. I mean, 403 with 18 zeros. That's a big, big number. The world produces billions every day, and much of it is actually available to us. It's no wonder that we feel overwhelmed. And I know I find it sometimes that I feel guilty if I don't read all the articles and papers I should be reading. And I'm not talking about the books and the podcasts. And okay, I'll stop there. What is the effect of this overwhelm on people in general and on our children? Uh, Carla, I'm sorry. This is amazing. I've got three people that I have to think about.
No worries.
Carla, why don't we begin with you?
Well, I think that it really depends on what it is that we're trying to convey, as far as the the onslaught of information, and it really depends on how you're using it, right? Ellie and I had a lovely conversation, and we were talking about, well, there's so much out there, and kids have to sort through it all. And my perspective is, why are you there? What are you doing? Are you there to enrich yourself, or are you there just to feed emotional state? And as you know, Ellie, right? A lot of kids actually are feeding their emotional state because they are either feeling inadequate or something, and it becomes overwhelming. But I think that if you have like a reason, a purpose for being out there, that begins to help to um, narrow down and take away some of that overwhelmment. I mean, I don't think that it's a simple thing to do, because we're emotional creatures, and if we're not getting the attention in schools or whatever, it's overwhelming. I mean, how many likes did I get? I mean, and then it's not constructive either. Then I think that there's a part to that too. Ellie, what do you think?
So, well, I think that there's so much there to unpack, but I really think that one of the elements of this that is so important is that ability to discern, why am I here? What am I doing with this information? And how can I um, manage it? Basically, how do I manage what I'm taking in and how much I'm internalizing that? Because there are many ways, sort of both on the front end and the back end, to manage the onslaught of information. And so much of that is just about kind of how involved you're letting yourself be. And I think that when there's that pressure from external factors, and I think that those pressures are especially felt perhaps by teenagers, by developing adults in their developing brains. They're looking for a lot of different things, hormones, emotions, all sorts of stuff there. But even for us adults, I see many, many adults just kind of get really fixated on feedback they're getting from different social media or just their phones, or staying in the know, just knowing what's going on, knowing the latest. And that sort of is a decision in a way. Even though these things are designed to entice us, we can choose how much we expose ourselves to that enticement and to those factors that can really influence how we perceive the real world around us, the full fleshed out world around us. And I think that that overwhelm is there's a lot of it, and it's hard to avoid, but being aware that it's there and aware that it's something that actually we do have to manage, and think about how we for ourselves are going to manage it, is the first step in making it more something we can use to our advantage rather than to our disadvantage, I guess.
Carla, you have really focused a lot of your work on how people actually can use the information in their work. So I'm curious as to how you view this overwhelm impact on people who are in their careers, not just young people, but in their careers.
I think there's a couple of things that haven't happened. And one of the things that haven't happened is that we really never went back to relearn how to use the knowledge and information that is available to us. That's not necessarily like a core skill at at a child level, at a high school level, at a college level. You're always being told you have to do this, read this, but the reality is that the world is so large, and there have been so many forethoughts that we don't spend the time learning how to learn at all in general. So from the standpoint of somebody in a work environment, if you don't come in with the technological skills, like maybe using Excel to more than just being able to put a spreadsheet together, but actually using it for macros, doing other things, or at least investigating how to do those things to to make your work life far more actually the ease of work, right? So we don't spend the time necessary in developing the understanding about knowledge, kind of knowledge management. I mean, and we talk about that all the time, right? It's not just managing a company's knowledge, it's also about managing your own. And it's a never ending process. It's a never ending story, right? I mean, you are always trying to build more, and technology is requiring that you do. I think that in it is overwhelming in a work environment. I can remember being an administrator at the university, and only because of my personality type, which is like innovator times X, right? Um, I would always look to innovate or to find a way to make things simpler for everybody, not just for myself, right? Anybody who interacted with me, it was like everybody. They don't think like that anymore, very rarely, where hey, you know what, we need to make this, the new practice, and it'll be easier for everyone. And oh no, no, we got to have everybody do it all by hand. It's like, what? You got to be kidding me. So anyway, I think that the overwhelm is the fact that we don't teach the that doesn't become core part of who we are, in dealing with technology in general and the fast pace. I mean, okay, I'm only going to mention it once, AI, and I promise I won't get into it, but look at it. It's 6 months ago. There was nothing,
Mhm.
hardly a word. You might have heard a little bit, and now it's insane. And these are expert systems, by the way, mostly. So, but anyway, sorry.
That's okay. Uh, I I'm interested in really pursuing a little bit more about this aspect of the information and the knowledge. Yes, it's overwhelming, but so is the technology. Uh, uh, the two of them are oftentimes conflated, and they are in fact different things. And I had a lovely person on. His name is Craig Delarge earlier, and he was talking about the what he called technology enabled wellness. And I thought, how can you think of the technology as a wellness thing? Well, what he was talking about was there are lots of real uses of the technology to improve your health. Okay. But he said something which I thought was absolutely terrific, and I know the two of you will enjoy it. He talked about the fact that kids, even children, will use their technology, their screens, 8 hours a day. And parents get upset about that. And he said, yeah, but look at yourself. How many hours are you on the screen? And are you explaining to your child that you're on it because this is how we eat and have a place to live? Whereas they need time for playing outside the screen. And I just thought that was such a tremendous insight that we are already modeling for our children. Ellie, I want you to pick up on this because I know this is an area of particular interest to you.
It is a big area of interest for me because I actually have small children of my own. I have a 7-year-old stepson and an almost 2-year-old daughter. And both of them, but I've especially noticed this shift in my daughter recently, have become really fixated on our screens and devices. And my husband and I have both become very cognizant of how frequently, we are in fact on our screens just by default,
Yeah.
without, as Carla has talked about, that sort of seeking for enrichment or more information or whatever good things we could be doing with the technology. We are looking at memes instead or something. Even while we're hanging out with our kids, it's like we're a little bit marginally bored for a minute, and we are like, man, I wonder what else is out there. And I think that is the kind of self-awareness, and I'm very much a work in progress in this, but I think that's the kind of self-awareness and self efficacy and self-management that even many of us adults are really working on learning still, I think. And the reality is technology has shifted dramatically in a very short period of time. Carla was speaking about the 6 months since AI has, taken over many different areas in certain ways, and we're still figuring out how to work with it. And so many people are figuring that out all at once. But there's, even, 15 years ago, nobody had a smartphone. That was not a thing that was around. And I was sort of a holdout on smartphones because I was like, why do I need that? Why do I want people reaching me all the time? That sounds terrible, And I think that, getting our brains, even as adults, used to how to make decisions and manage how technology influences our lives is something that all of us are learning, and actually making space and a model for learning that skill set is, I think, something that is really not super present in the world right now. There's not a it's we have this technology that can do all these things for kids, for adults, for all levels, and it's just like you're supposed to know how to use it well for you almost immediately. Like the technology can do it immediately, so can you figure out how to use it immediately? But we're humans, we need to integrate it, we need to learn how to use it, and that's a process that still takes time, even if the technology itself is very powerful and useful. And also, yeah, go ahead, Madeline.
I like the fact that you've said it takes time to learn how to use it, because there's really two levels, if I hear you right. One is how do you use the application? What do you click on, etc. But the
Right.
other is how do you integrate it into your life so that it doesn't subsume you?
Exactly. Or just, I think many of us have the problem where we have 5 different applications that basically all do the same thing. We use about 3% of each of them and don't really get any use out of any of them. And then one day we go to a tutorial about one of them and we're like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing all this time? And that's, that's times, 1,000 for children who are actually introducing many, many new things all the time. And I think that making actual space and time and structures to helps people of all ages, learners of all ages, kids, adults, everyone, actually learn how to make these technologies work for them, not
Work.
just how the
Yes.
technology works,
Yeah.
make it work for them. That's the goal.
Carla, thoughts?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I mean, it's to my point. I can remember the day that they put a computer in front of me. This was like 1984, 85 ish, and it was like one of the very first Macs. Not the little skinny little one, but it was like a real one for graphic arts, and they had all these programs, Aldus and Adobe, and it was the very first set of software. There were no teachers, there was no internet, there was nothing. That was just a computer with a bunch of programs on it. And yes, the Apple had a training session if they wanted to, but not to the level that you needed to be able to be function. And I had to learn all of that, right? So it wasn't that I could only learn this one thing, which is what we tend to do. We tend to kind of like separate out, oh, I only do this task. Well, I had like a whole realm, this whole realm. So absolutely, we need to have that needs to be more important in education, is that the the applications are powerful and can do so much if we think about it the right way. It's
As you're talking, it reminds me, I used to teach a course to what were called admin assistants at the time,
Mhm.
of how to bring the technology effectively into their work, because they really didn't know how to do that, how to leverage the power. But I don't want us ever to lose in this conversation the need to also manage our use of it so that it does not consume our lives and create that sense of frustration that we're not doing it right.
Well, to your point, because what we have a new rule in the house, and the new rule is that like right around 8:30, we shut it off. And
Mhm.
because people aren't sleeping well, and that's also because you're constantly on and you're constantly looking at the screen. Um, and 8:30 it shuts off, and I don't turn it on until probably around 8:30 in the morning on purpose so that I give myself time to write because I'm writing, quite a lot. And then or doing other things, like making cookies or, going outside, being in my greenhouse and I mean living. Love my computer. Please don't misunderstand. I love it, but you're right that, putting kind of boundaries are really important.
Yeah. Ellie, I'd really like your thoughts on this. Get down to some really nuts and bolts things that adults should be thinking about in terms of their children and how they can help their child learn this lesson as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, you know, the most important thing, honestly, as with most things, like good, good news, bad news, is modeling it yourself, right? That, if you are somebody who's, on your phone all the time, doesn't have boundaries that you're setting, doesn't keep to those boundaries when you've set them, your kids are going to pick up on that, and just sort of, be in an environment where that sort of behavior is encouraged. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing necessarily, but if your goal is to manage it and demonstrate that there's management of it, that you want to be actually doing something to management, whatever realistic thing that can be. If you have to work till 9:30 or 10 at night because that's what your work is, what is the wind down? What is the kind of like decompression thing that you're doing, that you're encouraging your kids to do, that you're helping them learn how to do at
Mhm.
the end of their screen time, at the end of your screen time, to help make that, a ritual that will help them get out of that mode and get
Mhm.
ready for sleep and ready for, a different part of their existence, right? Maybe, you all go, outside and look at the stars for a few minutes or something like that each night, get that outdoor time, get like some fresh air, just have some sort of transition. My husband and I frequently will like have, some kind of beverage on our little terrace area when I'm like done with work because I finished kind of late. And then we'll have sort of a transition to no screens time where we are like, reading hardcover, like books, and, not having our phones with us at all, so that we can really kind of just like have something that is offline and get into that mode. And that's the kind of thing that you can like help your kids figure out what is that for them. Maybe it's a yoga thing. Maybe they like taking the dog for a walk. Maybe they like, prepping their lunch for the next day or something like that. There's all sorts of tangible, experiential things that you can be doing that will help them transition to a different part of their lives that doesn't involve being tapped in and plugged in all the time.
Oh, I love the idea of involving the child in determining what it is they want to do that decompression. That's just wonderful. I remember when I was raising my daughter, uh, the computers were not a big thing, but television was, and I didn't want her spending time on television either. So I made a rule that for every hour that she read, she could have an hour on television. Well, she's become this avid reader as a result. And I'm thinking, imagine if we taught our kids some things to do to alleviate that intensity to the technology. They may become very different users altogether.
Yeah, I've seen things where parents will, if you have the capability to do this, change the Wi-Fi password every, day or something, and they'll be like, when you've done XYZ, then you can get the Wi-Fi password, and all the things that you want to do on there can be unlocked, or whatever it is. And I think that can be a, if you have that kind of fun, kind of environment in your home, maybe that's something that works for you too. But I think helping them learn how to do other stuff with their time and
Mhm.
really spend long enough doing it to appreciate the
Yeah.
slower reward value of it. Because I think that's one of the other things. We get a lot really quickly from our screens. We get this quick fix of something that feels good, and it's hard to replicate that with real world things in the same amount of time. And I think that that sort of derails those activities. And so creating that space, I think that alone is creating that space alone in our world is almost like a revolutionary thing, because as we're talking about here, the overwhelm is can crowds out a lot of that space, or
Yeah.
can.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it just as a little side note, my husband and I, we were talking about this morning. You know, and it's like, oh my god, I got to talk. Um, and and he said, well, I'm overwhelmed because I have too many choices, and I suck at making decisions. And it was really kind of funny because I think that that's another part of it, is that there are so many choices, and there isn't a really good way of decision making, and we don't practice that part of it. And as Ellie was talking, that's what kind of came to mind, is that when you can't be decisive about something, and that is part of that, right? Instead of this, I got to have more, it's like, no, you know what, I'm done, and I can make those decisions. Having a sort of decisiveness is very important in decision making, and overwhelming choices, I mean, of everything that you could possibly imagine, I mean, really.
Hmm. Well, earlier, Ellie, I think you talked about you need to know why you're learning something or why you're pursuing something. But you work with young people. How do you help them with that decision making process?
Yeah, I'm so excited that you asked about that, because I think that there is a lot of this that is applicable to adults as well, and kids. But I think some of it comes down to sort of organizational psychology type principles that has to do with, like, okay, what are people doing here? What's motivating them? And how do we harness that in a way that's going to make sense to people's brains and not overwhelm them with decisions they have to make. So, and I will just admit that even though I work in this space, I think most people who work in these spaces, are honest enough to admit that they regularly have to remind themselves of this themselves and go through
Hmm.
this process themselves with new activities, new tasks, even old activities, old tasks. And I think that, a big thing that I do with students is I help them figure out what are sort of a couple things, if we're working on academics, like coaching, for example, what are a couple things this year that, or this X number of weeks time bound thing that I really want to be focusing on? Like, what are the things that are really important to me? And if we can start out as broad as they want, like maybe they're like, I just really want to get better at writing, They're
Hmm.
like, and then we dig into that together. It's a conversation. We co create how they think about what they're going to be doing with that. And that helps to draw out, like, maybe they don't feel like they've ever learned grammar very well, or maybe they don't feel like they know how to move from having some good ideas to having like an outline they can actually write paragraphs from. There's many different steps along the way. This is just an example, but then we can figure out how do we infuse the right focus to help them get to this broader goal, and help them know what information is relevant to them and what's not, and it's almost like making a sort of collaborative decision tree, right? It's like, well, if we've decided we're going to get better at writing, and here are the three top problems with it, right? With my writing, right? Here are the things we can do to address those problems. If we find out there's some other thing that addresses some other part of writing, like, that's just not really relevant to us. I don't have to consider that because it's not part of my goals. It's not part of what I've already thought about as my goals and my focus. And I can have a better sense of what is aligned with that, and not have the same sense of overwhelm from all of the many possibilities and decisions, all the time. And you can kind of replicate this process in a collaborative way with many different fields. And in fact, it, I think, is really important that you kind of return to that goal setting and that envisioning frequently, like every month or so, to make
Mm.
sure that actually what was happening before is still happening now. Maybe you've gotten better at this and you're still feeling like this is a gap area. Maybe you couldn't even see that this is a gap area because the other thing was kind of blocking it before, you know? And so it's that sort of process of actually reevaluating things regularly in a non-judgmental way, in a way that's just like, what's working for me to get where I want to go and what's not working for me, you know? Um,
Mhm.
and that process is something that I model for my students, and I talk with their parents about how to integrate that at home. And then I also, help them learn how to do that for themselves. We
For
practice
themselves. Yeah.
asking
That's
those questions, filling those questionnaires out, and then we talk about applying that to other areas that we're not working on together.
yeah. Yeah. Now, Carla, you wrote a book called Loving to Learn. I know that part of that had to do with this business of selecting which area of interest. Why don't you talk a little bit about the processes that you recommend for anybody to use?
Well, in the whole intent behind Love to Learn was that you really need to be building your mindset and skills for the future, right? And that when you have too many, you have too many possible uh, uh, you have too much that's going on in your life, and the intent of the book was really, what, everybody's got to have a professional portfolio, and you learn so much, and yet you don't give yourself, you don't account for the learning that you do, you know and this helps to help you to focus. It also looked at how businesses, what they were looking for in people. What kind of skill sets were they looking for in people, and what kind of mindset, too. And being open and being flexible, that was like a huge thing. And it's become more, the more rigid are, the harder it is in with this onslaught of all of this knowledge and information, at your fingertips. If you're not flexible to incorporate things, it becomes very, very difficult. So, in a nutshell, it was really to encourage people to A, take stock in what you do know, and
Hmm.
B, here's what businesses are looking for in the individuals that they have working for them, right? What they would ultimately love to have. Humility was part of it. I mean, it was really an enjoyable process going through and developing the book. And the other thing that we did, which is a little bit different, is that my partner in crime when we wrote this, Dr. Sandy Kohlberg, she's about 10 years older than I am, and we wrote our perspectives in the book. So for each of the chapters, it was like, hey, this is what I experienced, and then she wrote what she experienced, and they were very different. I mean, even though there was a lot of synergy, it was a very different time for her uh, than it was, for me. So, loving to learn. I mean, that's like the core of why we're here. I mean, to me,
Yes, I
right?
understand that
Enrich yourself. I mean, it's
one.
and if for the first time in our lives,
Yeah.
we have everything at our fingertips. Everything.
Hmm.
Whether you want to learn to paint or
Hmm.
to bake bread, or to have somebody help you to fix your LED
Yeah.
um, uh,
I know. I no longer go.
display.
I no longer go to the manual. I just go to YouTube.
Right, right. And the thing is that there are 5 or 6 different versions, right, of it. And Ellie and I were talking about this, and it was like, okay, you can look at those 5 or 6, what's the same in all of them and what's different, and then you come up with something new, which is lovely. That's lovely. So anyway, yeah, love to learn.
Uh, Ellie, I also really appreciated how again, from the fact that you talked with the young people to let them say what was important to them. Uh, I love to coach teenagers. I mean, I just think they're the future, and they're educated enough that you can have a deep conversation with them. Their their brains are not quite finished until they get into their 20s, but still they're pretty well formed. Uh, and they think so beautifully when you ask the right question. So even asking them what's important to you, they can usually answer that question. You may not like the answers, but that's not the objective. The objective is for them to remember what's important to them, because that aspect of setting some kind of boundaries helps in making decisions. Oh, this one looks interesting, but it's way over there and I'm over here. I don't need to worry about it. I
Absolutely.
I,
Oh, I
I
just
read.
said agreeing with you. Yeah, sorry.
I, now I was trying to remember a quote from Warren Buffett. He said that successful people. I'm not going to do it right, but the message is that successful people do things, but really successful people say no to more than anything else. Really know how to say no. That was it. Really know how to say no. So making that distinction to say this is not part of where I want to go, to help, because I think that is the it becomes the essence of our overwhelm. There is so much. I remember a psychological study one time. It talked about choosing which kind of chair you wanted. And if you went into the store and there were 6 chairs, you could make a decision. And if
Mm,
there were 106 chairs, you couldn't make that decision. It was just more than what your brain could comfortably handle. And the only way you could do it was chunk it. Those, I know I don't like black chairs, I don't, and then you finally got it down to the number that you can do.
Well, and that's to the point. Too many choices and decision making. Then it is right. Then it's this one or that one, or do I know my mind? That's another part of it too. Is that, or am I just unconsciously being here without really understanding my motivation for doing what I'm doing?
Yep. The other aspect I want to come back to you, Carla, is the aspect of what do what does your employer want? That's another way to limit things. And even for young people, what do employers generally want? Just to give them thoughts on that.
Yeah. So technology. Hello, everybody. Learn to use Excel, please. More than just a spreadsheet, right? Or try to do your presentations that way. Oh my goodness. So anyway, technology was way up there. They wanted collaboration at just what Ellie was talking about. Collaboration. You want to be able to work with others. They wanted people who had some humility. They not just empathy, but humility. They wanted people who also respected other people's positions and were able to find the and instead of a but, right? And it
Mhm.
was really interesting, So there were a lot of attributes that they wanted in their people. Innovation. They wanted people. I don't know if I agree that they really want people to innovate because it can be very disruptive, but
They want people to be flexible.
they want
That's
people to
really
be
what they want.
flexible. And it's like, oh, this is the new thing that we're going to do. I think that the flexibility is probably more accurate of a way to describe what they want. So it's really kind of an interesting thing about what they were looking for in particular. Oh, and critical thinking skills. That was like number 10, like one
Yeah.
was being able to think critically, being able to look at what information is available to you and then be able to make some kind of a decision from that.
That's right.
That's
Carla, you named them, you rattled them off, and I know that came from significant research. You looked at position descriptions. Am I right? hundreds of position descriptions.
Oh, yeah. Well, we did two things. We went out and looked at what the literature said. What were they saying about what did they want? And then we looked actually at we went into all the job postings for as many as we like one segment, like we'll take like one segment, management, for instance. And we looked at all of the skill sets that were required. And then we broke down those skill sets
Mhm.
into, well, what is this really, and what do you have to be able to do?
Wow.
And it was phenomenal. And there were, over and over and over again. Now, some of that may be because the way that HR develops their job descriptions isn't necessarily, and this is a drawback, right? That I can't help, but they don't necessarily have the job descriptions describe really what you're going to do.
Well, I'm gonna suggest that you've said what you did. I mean, you looked at massive numbers of these things to really get the right stuff. So
Yes,
I just want to I want to applaud you on that enormously
thank you.
because I know how long it took, and that
Yeah.
now there is a valuable piece that people can use if they want to really get serious about preparing themselves. Not necessarily for a job, maybe it's a pivot that you want to do, or if you're a teenager, you're entering the marketplace.
What
Okay,
do you have to know at
yeah,
least at a minimum, right?
Adam, right?
Right? Because there's a lot of intensive learning that happens on the job, right? Nobody's prepared
Yeah,
for everything at the very
that's
first
right.
moment you walk into the place.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Well, we are almost out of time. Can you tell? This has been such a rich conversation. I want to make sure that each of you have whatever couple of words you want to say, and then make sure you tell people how to get in touch with you. And Ellie, let's start with you.
Sure, absolutely. So, well, first off, thank you so much, Madeline and Carla, for this time together today. This has been such a joy. And, I think that when we're talking about overwhelm and just kind of how to deal with this onslaught of information that we're all swimming in right now. So much of, I think, what we've talked about today and what I really want to leave people with is that much of this is about giving yourself permission and giving your kids, and if that's applicable, permission to take a step back from the demands of society and technology enough to make decisions that are authentic to them and to you about what is worth your time and what is worth your attention and what is worth your energy. And everything in our economy wants your time, attention, and energy, but you don't have to give it to everybody and everything. And we all, know that in theory, but actually creating the space and time and systems and ways of thinking about these issues and these pieces of information to create that space, to create that time and make choices, good choices that we're proud of, that are aligned with our values, that we're excited about, of how to spend our time and energy is, I think, a lesson that adults and teens and kids, all of us, are still learning and can be more intentional about learning in the years to come. And so that's one of the major things that I really like to instill in my students, whether we're working on, their chemistry class or college applications or test prep, whatever it is, there are ways, no matter how standardized the process is, whether it's test prep or something else, there are ways to help students feel empowered in those educational systems in
So,
ways
how
that are
do people get in touch with you?
yes. So people can get in touch with me either at on LinkedIn. You can look for Ellie Campisano, ELLIE CAMPISANO. And on Instagram, you can find me at Enlivened Education. And I have lots of different stuff on there. So please come find me. You can also email me at ellie@enlivenededucation.com. And I would love to hear from you. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Ellie. Carla.
yeah, and to that point, know why you're out there. I mean, what is your intention for looking at all of that overwhelm? Are you feeding an emotional state? Do you need to be angry really? Do you need to laugh? Okay, I understand that, right? But that's feeding an emotional state. And then, if that is it, make sure that you balance your biases, because that's extremely important, because that's why it becomes overwhelming. You'll hear conflicting voices, and sometimes they have something to say too. So that's why it's very important to know why you're out there doing what you're doing on the internet. So either you're feeding emotional state, you're trying to enrich yourself, you're trying to learn something, you're trying to become something new. There are so many things out there that are there to help you.
So
And
how do people get in touch with you?
and how do people get in touch with me? Best way is through LinkedIn, and yeah, so it's
It's
pretty exciting. Yeah,
just go to Karla Phlypo,
it's just Karla Phlypo. Yes, yep. That
P
you'll be able to find
H
me. Pardon me.
P-H-L-Y-P-O.
Phlypo. Yes.
Thank you.
Hlypo.
Yes.
Not
Thank,
YL. Everybody always does that.
thank you both for such an exciting conversation.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself.
Abraham Maslow said, one can choose to go back towards safety or forward toward growth. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again. In Grounds for Thought today, I'm going to be talking about a book that I wrote called Riding the Current: How to Deal with the Daily Deluge of Data. Now, you may feel that I'm cheating by referencing my own writing, but yes, it was my own writing that taught me. In fact, if most authors are honest, they will tell you they learn so much as they write down in clear language what they've been thinking. In fact, it is the act of writing that demands that you learn your own thoughts, forces you, those thoughts, to be expressed in words that may never have crossed your mind until you had to write it so that someone else could understand. Now, if you become overwhelmed with the amount of information and knowledge that comes to us today, we have to decide how we might deal with it. But then we have to do it. Now, the first part is the decision. The second part is to act on it. We have to act on it again. And we have to act on it again and again. I remember the very first time I had to write a performance evaluation of one of my staff. That had to be one of the hardest things I ever did. I was asked to help an individual see where she needed to improve, along with telling her what she had done well. And in the end, I had to give her a score, and I was incredibly uncomfortable. I felt so subjective. It felt so arbitrary. I didn't think the whole idea, I didn't like the whole idea. In the end, I just did it. Years later, after doing hundreds of performance evaluations, I have come to do them with ease. I still don't like the idea, but I have come to understand that my judgment is part of my job. Subjective as it may be, it comes with the territory of being a manager. The lesson had grown from doing the evaluation skillfully, the mental part, to becoming the coach who embodies the evaluation in a supportive manner, the emotional and physical part. Dana Hawes tells a story of her decision to just do it. She says, there was a huge learning curve that happened to me when I went to graduate school in Santa Barbara. I had waited 11 years, she says, before I went to graduate school, and up to then I made jewelry. My identity was a person who made things. I hardly opened a book. I read very little. I didn't see myself as a writer. And I remember when I had to write my statement of interest in order to get into graduate school, I sat down and I didn't know how to write. When I went to graduate school, I decided I'm going to become a good writer. I took a writing class. I even took a theory class, and writing theory is so complicated. I taped the lectures, I listened to them, I read over my notes. I was panicked. I thought I would fail the class. I did a lot of work, and then suddenly it hit me, and the theory became clear. I wrote a review of an art exhibition. I sent it to the art critic at the newspaper, and I was hired by the paper. After that, I simply flourished because I loved to write. Dana went on to say, I made a real commitment to learn how to write because I made so many huge changes just to go to graduate school. I felt I just can't fail. The decision to do it was the beginning of a great journey for Dana. Even the hardest things will become easier if you practice doing it. Even the unpleasant things will become easier. And in the end, you learn more than you ever thought possible, just because to do it and then follow through. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. And if you're on YouTube, click the like button and subscribe. Do it for the others who are trying to find this kind of information. It helps. Thanks so much. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.